flesh.
Let's talk about
Speaking
human
of human
flesh.
Flesh. In the flesh.
Flesh for fantasy. That's horrible. Oh my god. Okay.
Wow, that
I
was,
know,
yeah.
right?
See what happens when she puts red on?
I
Shit.
know. I turned into some crazy bitch.
That's crazy.
Cheers to you.
Cheers.
So you guys, we are drinking human flesh.
Yeah.
Karena Humana. There's a
Carne
story.
humana.
There's a story there, right?
Yeah, but it's a mystery, so we don't actually know.
So perfect. So what does human flesh, the wine, have to do with
Creative?
creativity?
Yeah.
Well, it's all about telling a good story. So, cheers to you. Welcome to Creative Happy Hour.
Welcome.
Welcome, welcome.
This is where we get drunk on the creative possibilities.
Yes, we
and
do.
you join us.
And you join us. So, cheers to you.
Cheers.
To Karena Humana
Yes.
from Napa Valley. It smells really sweet. Oh my god.
Oh, dear.
And don't forget to subscribe.
Yeah.
Click on the little
Hit the little
knob.
Do
ding,
it.
Ding bell.
Ding, ding.
Yes.
See, our glasses look like the bell, so
They
don't
do.
act like you don't know what it looks like.
Exactly.
It looks like this. It's right there.
And it sounds like
and you just
ding.
click on it.
And you click on it.
Click on it.
And
Let's try this human flesh
Let's
drink.
try the human flesh. They're gonna be like, what the hell? Okay.
Distilled
Ooh, ooh.
human flesh.
We bought it for the name.
Because it has a good story.
And they're not sponsoring us, so it's okay.
So it's fine. We can say
It's
whatever
fine.
we want.
We can say whatever the hell we want.
Yeah.
So Karena Humana wines, St. Helena, California.
Yeah. So
It's a blend. It's fruit forward. That's true. Truer
is it
story.
like blended up human flesh?
I know. Truer story was never told. It is very fruit forward.
It's very blendy.
It's very blendy. They say that they let the fruit express itself,
Oh.
tell its story, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of like us.
Kind of like us. We tell our story. We express
So
ourselves.
you can see why we related to this bottle quite a bit.
We did. And the human flesh thing, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, it
that's-
was a no-brainer.
For today, especially.
It was irresistible.
It kind of was.
Yeah.
So, what is the story of Karena Humana, this wonderful St. Helena 2015 white? It is General Vallejo. The story starts with General Vallejo.
Oh, General Edward Turner Bale.
No.
Vallejo.
Vallejo gifted the property to Bale. And of course, I'm going to do my pop culture.
Gifts, like 20 acres of
He probably
land.
killed a bunch of Mexicans for him or something.
Yeah,
that's what he
it
did.
was like
We're
a
gonna make
Mexican.
that. Let's make
No,
the
but it
story.
was. That's right. I mean, there was like a little Mexican war. I mean, this bitch is always doing her research. She's so annoying. So annoying. Like, constantly reading and being all nerdy. I can't stand
nerdy
it.
as fuck.
She
That's
doesn't
what I do.
look that smart, but watch out,
Watch
people.
out, stealth smart. Yeah, Karena Humana, I even, translated that shit without Google Translate. So General Vallejo gifts his bitch, Edward Bale.
Yeah.
Not
Edward
related to
Turner.
Christian Bale? I don't know.
No, I don't know. I
Not
don't know.
sure.
Well,
Not sure.
General Edward Turner Bale was an English immigrant.
Yeah. Doesn't tell me he's
He
not
cruised
related
over.
to-
He ended up in Monterey, California. I did a little reading too.
Oh, did you?
lady.
Oh, you see? You did that too.
It takes two to tango.
You know what? She's like a total freaking
Yeah.
nerd too. It's really bad.
Yeah.
She's the intellectual here. I'm the pop culture. So, okay. So he goes to Monterey. He kills a bunch of Mexicans. He has a
Yeah.
grist mill.
Which, by the way,
What's
I tried
grist?
about like what
Did you
the
look up
fuck is
grist?
grist?
Fuck. It's some kind
I
of
feel like it's
it's not gluten free, I'll tell you that.
I feel like it's a kernel of something.
Yeah, I would say it's some kind of a grain.
Yeah.
Shit.
Yeah, it's gristle.
It's gristy. It's a little gristle.
Yeah,
Gristle
like
light.
Gristle Puffs. You know that cereal you used to eat?
Oh my god, my favorite Gristle Puffs.
Gristle,
Oh my god, as a
Gristle Puff
child,
magic.
constantly
With
magic,
milk?
lucky Gristle charms. Yes, completely. That's what I had.
The Gristle Smash
That's
Mouth.
Quite a story.
Yeah.
Quite a story.
Anyway, I
love
made it up.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sticking to my story.
Stick to your story.
So we had a grist mill. If anybody
Yes.
wants to
look
you
it
know,
up and let
talk
us
about
know
it. Yeah,
why we're
I mean,
stupid and we don't
the
know or
grist
care.
part is kind of irrelevant. I think
It's kind of inconsequential.
Yeah.
Yeah. What
Makes
interests
no
me is that he called this thing Karena Humana, which tells me that he probably had a pretty sick sense of humor.
I feel like something. Yeah,
killed
I
some
feel like
Mexicans.
I
Again, I'm
feel
telling you, this-
like
right, we're
like a
feeling this?
barbecue happened,
Right?
And
Human flesh.
yeah, there was a barbecue that happened,
Yeah.
and he was being kind of,
Gross.
No, I mean, he was kind of bragging about it, I think. I think these are bragging rights.
He's like, Mexican food.
Yeah.
That's what he was doing. Oh my God. This is a disgusting story.
It's
a story.
What an a-hole.
What an a-hole this bale hole was.
What a bale hole.
Grist hole.
Yeah, so anyway, he had a grist mill.
He was gifted this land.
Yeah.
He made some wine from it. And then did his daughter marry
So
someone
his
cool?
daughter ends up hooking up with
Always
Charles Krug. She's a little slut, but she is.
Charles Krug, I mean, I would have hooked
so
up with
he
Charles
already
Krug.
had this 20 acres of property.
That's pretty good.
And Bale's wife was like, oh, this isn't just going, this is when, 1860, when women were still property of men.
Right.
So the mother, the Bale mother, posted Bale. She posted she made her daughter have a prenuptial agreement with Charles Krug.
Oh, that's an awesome story.
Yes. And anyway, he ended up, I guess, planting a vineyard on this 20 acres.
It's a beautiful thing.
And so
now we're drinking this stuff.
Now we're drinking human flesh.
Human flesh, which is super cool. So, okay, other than the cool story, let's do some tasting notes on this one.
It has like a neon green color. So
it's a little odd in color.
It almost looks like an absinthe.
Right?
Absinthe of absinthe.
There's an absence of absinthe.
Yes.
Yeah, it is a little greenish.
It's green.
And
it's verde. It looks
verde. It's a little vino verde, but not quite. In taste, it's okay. Let's do it. Let's do some notes here. It's straightforward for damn sure.
I mean, it definitely has kind of a briny smell to it. Do you smell the brine on that?
Yeah, and like olive juice.
What's the freaking?
It's olive juice.
Do you think they threw olive juice in?
I wouldn't put it
Or do you think they peed in it?
Shit.
Do you think it's?
That'd be a bad story. Human pee? No, it's called human flesh. They wouldn't do that.
Do you think they wouldn't do that?
No, actually, you're right. With that name, like I don't even know where we got this thing. There's an owl on the top of the
there is like all kinds of shit going on.
There's a lot going on. There's a lot of stories going on. So, this is going to be really a good example when we talk about why storytelling is so important.
We'll be like, how did Micah end up in a ditch in Puerto Madera?
Karena Humana.
Yeah. Well, last time I saw her, she was drinking Karena Humana.
So this to me is not crystal clear. And honestly, when you tell a story, we'll start telling why telling a story is important. I agree with you with the brine, and I'm going to throw in olives. It is a little pissy, isn't it?
It's a pissa.
It's a pissa. This is terrible. I mean, I'll drink it, but I mean, damn. It's a lot of work.
And there's some like weird sprightly aftertaste, right? Like Sprite, literally Sprite. Like I think there's like piss and Sprite and like he's like okay. Charlie, throw piss in it. He's like Charlie, throw piss in it. So
let me just explain something. This is what happens when you don't sponsor our shit.
Yeah.
It's like Russian roulette. Yeah. Like, if you don't sponsor us, we might talk about you anyway, and it might not be awesome.
No, it might be your wine.
It might be
funeral.
a bad story.
Yeah.
It might be a very bad story.
Literally a bad story.
So why is storytelling? I mean, people, it's one of those catchphrases, right?
Yeah.
We hear this all the time. We hear people say, oh my God, storytelling. What's the story? Let's tell the story. Why is it so important? And I think that we've talked quite a few times about how there's so much noise out there. Yeah. There's such a glut of information. There's a glut of products. There's a glut of artistic expression. How do you cut through it? And I think that cutting through it with a story is a much more successful way of doing it. I mean, the only reason we bought this, I don't know if we bought it or if it should, but Karena Humana, somebody bought it.
I don't know that somebody put it on the doorstep, but maybe they did.
Somebody bought it. And somehow it got to us. Because
somebody made some money on that,
right? But because of its name,
I hope not more than like $7.99.
Oh God, I hope too.
I hope it was like six
something, $7.89 maybe.
$5.
We'll give it that.
$50.
But yeah, but for sure. But like, how do you why do you need a story? You need a story
because that's how we evolved as humans. I mean, stories kept us alive. That's how you knew from a story.
That's how you learned.
Why there was thunder, why there was earthquakes. Yes. I mean, did you ever read the,
I forget the name of the
Clan
story.
of the Cave Bear.
Oh yeah. Super porny. I read
Way
it for porn.
too much sex.
I didn't read it for
too
the,
much sex.
I didn't read it for the.
Oh my god! I was
information.
like, I
read
think
it
that's
for
the
porn.
first time I heard about doggy style. But
right?
I mean,
Neanderthal style. They call
yeah,
it back then.
Neander style. Let's do a Neander style, baby. Yeah, Clan of the Cave Bear. Ooh,
you know what's so weird?
It is
I was
very
thinking
funny,
that. I was thinking of that weird ass book today for some reason.
Clan of the Cave.
Yes. I was like, why am I thinking about this book? That crazy book. But you know what? Actually, it's very interesting that you should bring it up because
Jondalier, or what was his name?
Yeah, some stupid name like that. John. I was like,
John.
Yeah, it's like fuck that shit. His name's
like
John.
Giant
John.
penis
Yeah.
guy. Jondalier.
And he was probably pretty ugly in real life. He probably looked kind of like caveman-ish,
he had a big jaw,
right? Yeah, and like brow ridges. Yeah, he's all brow ridged out. So gross.
God.
But Lascaux, the caves of Lascaux, are one of those examples of storytelling because those we always joke about how we want pictograms back. All that should bring back the pictogram. But it's a way of storytelling of like what kind of food did we eat and how did we catch it and what did our tribe do and what are we known for?
And what do you do when there's an earthquake? And what do you do when it rains?
And when the thunder comes. Well, did you read? I mean, without another one of the stories like Clan of the Cave Bear, but no porn, was Nanook of the North.
I didn't read it.
Was it Nanook of the North or was it? There was another fucking book. No doubt, but it was about these Eskimo, and one of the stories was that they would put the elders out on an ice floe when it was time for them to go, right? Because freezing to death is a very painless way of dying.
Yeah, you just kind of go
to
sleep.
So they'd be like, go drift off to sleep, and they put the grandma out on the ice floe, and then because their kid was going to be born. The woman was pregnant, gonna have a baby,
Need more room in the house.
Need more room in the igloo, and so they put grandma out, and all of a sudden the baby's born, and they're like, "Fuck, no teeth! Oh no!" And so they run back. They're like, "Shit, grandma, please still be alive." And the grandma's like, I'm not frozen yet. I'm an Eskimo."
I would be pissed if I was grandma.
Right?
I mean, I would go Karena Akhavein on those bitches.
Right? They're like, "Grandma, we need you. What the fuck? The kid has no teeth." And so the grandma tells them this beautiful story about how the teeth. And so they bring grandma back for like a year until the teeth come in. And then they put her back on the ice floe. But that is a way of remembering things, when you think of the whole griot tradition as well in Africa, which I think is one of the more fascinating ones because that's kind of a verbatim transcription of stories. But it's incredible.
Well, the stories were repeated and they essentially told you the story of your tribe or the story of your family and essentially how to stay alive. And what happens to you if you deviate from the rules of the group or the tribe?
Right.
And
the Bible is very much that.
You didn't have an owner's. Yeah, you didn't have an owner's manual, so you would sit and you would hear the stories, and the females would tell the female stories, and the males would tell the male stories, and you would learn how to behave in your culture based on the stories.
I think the listening thing is kind of major because stories told on a website or in a book are one thing, but I think that when you hear them, and we've talked about listening to stories.
Well, they do say that there is a difference between listening to a story and how that vibration lands on the eardrum.
Resonates with you.
Yeah, it does.
It can't resonate.
The intonation of the voice, the expression of the voice.
Sometimes there were chants involved, there's repetition involved, there's some kind of a poetry involved. And I think that all of that is really major. And that's why I think that TED Talks have become such a major thing for us.
Yeah.
Because that is our modern version of storytelling. People are giving us these ideas, which we might think are a little bit much, but there is told to us in a story format.
Yeah, I listened to a TED Talk last night, actually.
Always. Well, we both listen to TED Talks quasi constantly, which is lovely. And a lot of people do, which is great. And we always joke about how, podcasts don't go viral and stuff like that. But TED Talks do essentially go viral because of their format, because people know they're going to get this story in this format that is going to be useful for them.
Well, so growing up, my grandmother lived to be 94, and she would tell me
a story.
Yeah, actually. No, it just made me think. So she used to tell stories all the time, and growing up, I was actually horrified to have a child because she would tell her first childbirth story. And how,
but don't you notice how a lot of moms do that? Like that's our bonding mechanism. Is we tell our horror stories.
It's kind of like I'm going to tell you how horrible it is. So it's when you live through it, you're going to be part of
the tribe.
You're going to be it's almost like an initiation, right? It's an initiation. So it was funny because I, for some reason, fixated on this story of my grandmother telling the story of giving birth to her first child, and she was like 17.
Uh-huh.
This is her first child of 7 that she gave birth to.
Yes.
Can you imagine?
First, after that, she just
after that it was like taking a dump.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Nice
it probably
analogy.
was. But yeah. So it was like it was it was November, so it was this is in Ohio,
It was
so
a dark and stormy night.
Yeah, it was a dark and stormy night, and it was actually it was too soon really to have an ice. But, they actually did, it got cold enough for the rain barrel to freeze.
Oh.
So anyway, she has her first baby. A blood vessel broke and she almost bleeds to death. So they call, Dr. Oh God, I used to know his name. Anyway, Dr. Stevens. And he was her doctor and many of my cousins' doctors and my aunts and uncles' doctors for years and years.
And I'm sure that Dr. Stevens had a bunch of stories as well.
Oh my God, if that guy
right?
was still alive, if I could interview him. So he, this is when they would come to your house. It wasn't a midwife, but it was Dr. Stevens, and he would come and...
Well, it's the whole traveling tradition as well. Of
yeah,
the doctors
he would travel to the house.
Storytellers and everything is amazing.
And, she was bleeding, and basically he went out, and there had been an early freeze in November, and he cracked ice out of the ice barrel because you didn't have a freezer. You didn't have any
he
of
froze her gooch, and he was
and
like,
he
boom.
packed her with ice, and he told my grandfather, if she lives through to the morning, she'll survive.
Oh, God.
And so when I was in college, I took this writing class, and I wrote this poem about how, all the drops of rain that had consolidated there then frozen.
And once you got out of the guidance counselor's
that determined
office.
my future. That like if there wasn't ice in the rain barrel that night, Grandma wouldn't have survived. Yeah. And therefore I wouldn't be here.
Right.
And so it was this whole thing.
Oh, wow.
All these details, and I go through it, and I'll let you read it sometime.
Yeah.
And so I sent it to a couple people because I wanted to send it. You know how like the New Yorker has those poems that are kind of like stories, and I wanted to send it in. And I send it to a couple different people in my family to kind of review it to see if I'm talking shit.
Right.
And the interesting part were, they were like, oh yeah, well it wasn't at her house, it was at her mother's house. There were all these details. There were all these details about the story that I didn't get right because I'd been hearing it as a child growing up, and I got the gist of the story.
Okay, so that's where we get to the gist is important, like the details less so. I think that I
felt a little disoriented because I felt like, oh, maybe I didn't have the story right.
Right, but it's such a defining thing.
Yeah.
And I know that there's some details that are important, but the detail that's important is there was ice in the bucket and she survived.
And it saved her life.
Right.
I mean, as far as we know, it saved her life.
As far as you know, that saved her life.
Yeah.
But that's really all you need. Because when you're telling a story, so as a creative, how do you, or as an entrepreneur, because I mean, that's the thing that makes the difference between, your invention can be amazing. Your art piece can be amazing.
Yeah, you can go into details of like, it was made in Vermont and it was made here and it was this and it has all these bells and whistles.
But if you don't tell the story right, if you don't tell your story right, it can fall flat. Take 2 pieces of work or take 2 business plans. And if you don't tell that story properly, it's maybe the inferior one's going to win out because they learned how to distill that stuff, that meaning into something that really resonates with the person across from them. So what does it take to tell a story? I mean, I think that it's a skill that we all need to learn.
Well, I think it has to tap into this large vein of human emotion.
Oh, totally.
It has to somehow speak to the heart.
Oh, completely. Like, I think that it does. You need to know, okay, so when you're telling a story, first of all, you have to have your details down. You have to have your message down because why are you telling the story, right? I mean, you can tell the same story with same facts, right? But you can have very different reasons for telling the story, right? You can be using the same story to impress your grandchildren or to sell a bar of soap. I mean, or an ice maker or whatever. Like, that story of your grandmother could be used a million different ways. So you have to know who's across from you and listening to you and why that story is being told and which are the details that we're going to put forward. It doesn't matter whose house it was in. At all, at all.
No.
But to the great grandchildren or whoever it is, they want to know that detail because what matters to them is something different.
Well, because the thing that a story will do is it will create an image in your mind.
Yeah.
So it this story that I heard over and over was in a particular place and a particular, and I had a vision of it. So when people told me that, like, all of the sudden that the picture was in a different place that I couldn't picture, then I was like, oh.
Well, because we get attached to our stories.
We get attached to our stories.
And that's the thing where even when it's advertising or something like that, we get attached to those stories.
Right.
When you look at what, first of all, Steve Jobs, when he used to do any kind of presentation of any Apple product, his storytelling was incredible, where you'd feel so invested of like, oh my God, I'm going to take this Apple product, and this is like the culmination of this amazing story, and I'm going to do something incredible
you felt like you were getting invited to go on the space shuttle.
Oh my God,
or something.
You
were an invite.
Totally.
You were invited.
Or like you see the Budweiser ads with like puppies and horses and all this shit.
Yeah.
It's like, that's such a story where you're like, oh my God, I'm part of this amazing story with veterans and American, this, and it all boils down to Budweiser, and you're like, this is just incredible, rah America, Dodge truck, and but it's when you look, my favorite source of seminal storytelling where it relates to the American public is the Super Bowl. Super Bowl ads.
Oh yeah.
They are examples of storytelling. Like, if you want to know how to tell a story properly, figure out what your favorite ad is and then look at why.
Yeah.
Because that shows you how to successfully tell a story in a creative way, for a certain result. But of course your results are different. Like, usually though, your result is you want something from a person across from you. Like, what is it that you want? Do you want validation? Do you want them to give you money? Do you want them to invest in you? Do you want them to buy what you're selling? What is it that you want? And I think your story is probably going to be shaped differently depending.
Yeah, it is. I agree with you. I definitely think that there's fine lines. The story can be too depressing or too shocking, and it can turn you away. I agree with you. It has to, or it's too cheesy, and you're just like, ooh, I don't want to associate with that. So there's levels. Yes. There's levels of association. I think you're like the palatableness of it. It's like
that is so exactly.
It's like when you go to a dinner party and they're like, oh, we're gonna put the smelly cheese, and I know like Janet and her husband are gonna like that, and we like it, but we're gonna put like plain potato chips, and we're also gonna put some pub cheese because we know that most people
round it out.
You're gonna bring some kind of average, middle of the road part to your story. It's all part of the story.
Right, but that's the common core. It's all cheese.
Yeah.
But let's bring in the common core.
You got to bring in the common core.
Understandable to everybody. Yeah. And then you can have the little details that appeal to
And you can still bring it to the dinner party.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I have a little list. I did a little list of tips for storytellers because I thought that it's useful for our creatives and our creative entrepreneurs. And it's something that we like to remind ourselves of because we're constantly kind of like, we're storytellers extraordinaire. Constantly. And the people that we associate with are generally very good storytellers because that is such a quality, I think. Like, that wins you. It's how to win friends and influence people is be a good storyteller. That's incredible.
It's a super attractive aspect.
Very much so.
Because it pulls you in. It pulls you in and you want to know more.
Yes, exactly.
Just like, Karena
Humana.
You're like, what the hell?
Right. If you told me that
that's probably the only reason you bought it.
Well, it is. Like, if you told me, like, hey, there's this wine called Human Flesh, I've been like, that's sucky. But then I was like, I can do a story about that.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden it became something palatable.
Yeah.
Amazing. But, and same thing where we're
not guzzling it. Don't get crazy.
We're not, we're sipping it just because we're thirsty, and that's the story that I'm sticking to. But the thing is like, you may have this main idea.
Yeah.
But if that idea, like, is not palatable, how do you spin a story around it to make it more palatable? There's that. But, okay, so I'm going to give you, like, some of my little tips and hints. So the first tip and hint is determine the big idea. So we said that, right?
Right.
You need a singular focus to your story. Your grandmother's singular focus was, y'all bitches are alive because of the ice. Because of doctors.
And she made us, she made us aware of it all the time.
Exactly. She made you feel like that.
We worshipped her.
Yeah, she survived for you. That was the big idea.
And it was like, you have my genetics.
Yes.
This is who you are.
Right.
Must carry on the legacy.
Yes.
You are strong.
Right.
You will you will conquer, you will live through anything.
Yeah, and she did all of that through this one story, which no doubt, was honed very
I
carefully.
don't know, and I don't know how conscious it was, but I definitely think that there was something to that for sure.
Totally.
So, and it worked.
So and it worked. So so the big idea is super important. I mean, if you don't know, if you can't summarize your big idea without having to back it up and do this whole thing, you're not going to be able to construct a story around it. So figure out what is your big idea.
Yeah.
How do you distill that to one sentence, and then start to build your story around it.
Yep.
Right? So your grandmother's story was, you bitches owe me. That's her big idea.
Yeah, you bitches owe me. No, you're right. You're right. I mean, and you think about, there's so many products. I mean, for some reason, I'm thinking of that. Remember that weird powder drink from the 80s called Tang?
Oh, God. Though, you know what? There's a cocktail that was made with Tang that I used to love. But you know what? The story was the astronauts. That's how they sold this disgusting orange powder.
So that's what I'm going to say. Like, this stuff was, it had to be toxic.
I mean, like, fucking foul.
It was disgusting.
Yeah, it was gross.
And, we would stick our finger in it, lick it, and like, it was disgusting.
Oh, God. Oh.
Same with like that weird,
on my tongue,
remember that weird
pouch with the disgusting chalk stick that you would like lick and stick it in this nasty ass powder.
And what was that?
Like citric acid. Dippity dips or dip
sticks or dip shits.
It was so gross.
Yeah,
like that.
I loved
stick.
it though.
Oh my God!
And your whole mouth would get like raw. Oh. But you think about it, it's like garbage and garbage.
Garbage plus garbage equals magic.
And I mean, I used to sell reclaimed barn wood.
Yeah.
Which was firewood where I grew up.
It was wood with holes in it.
Yeah.
Wood that the worms got to.
Yeah, I mean, it was
wood with nail holes in it.
It was firewood.
It was defective wood.
And I would sell this shit to like big time designers and architects.
Starbucks. And
Starbucks. Yeah, I mean, you name it. Like
they bought it. They bought it because of the story.
Because of the story.
Because of the story. You're like,
you
look where this little worm wound its way down before getting smacked by a hammer and burned by fire.
Yeah.
And this rusty nail. Yeah.
And it stood there, and it was, and I would tell, the story I would tell is that these tobacco, and it was true, these were tobacco farms. These were, tobacco was the only cash crop that you could grow in America besides cotton. You would grow wheat and corn, but that was just for food. But tobacco was a cash crop. And that was what, what are those people? The fucking rich people that started America.
Plantation people?
The tobacco people. I mean, like West Virginia, all those giant tobacco companies.
I mean, my family was growing tobacco and cotton. Cotton is an ugly part of our history. We don't really go there.
It is.
Tobacco, I mean, we still have the tobacco.
But tobacco is an ugly,
It is too. But it's actually easier to harvest.
It is, however, it's not that easy to harvest, and you have to hang it on those tobacco sticks, and then you have to let it dry, and you cannot harvest it until the first rain, otherwise it'll crumble.
Which is a great story.
So
story.
So these barns were they were part of the American landscape of the middle to the late 1800s, and they started to fall down. In the past 20 years, there's no more. There's a very small tobacco history. Anyway, my point is that I would sell this wood,
right,
and I would tell this story, and people would get completely enraptured with it.
Well, but that was the people. So that's very interesting because you were catering the story to your audience. You were catering the story to people who were out of touch with their personal history because they live in California and that nobody's from here.
And everyone's anonymous. And they live here for that reason. Yeah. And they want this autonomous.
They do, except they wanted to get back that history. So you knew exactly who you were talking to.
Yeah.
But so that's what you do when you're like, what's the main idea? The main idea is this is going to give you an identity. This has history that you don't have. That's your idea.
This is part of your American history. Exactly. You have to embrace it.
Exactly. And then, but you have you can either how do you express that to yourself, B, to somebody's grandmother, simplify the shit out of it, and C, to somebody that you're trying to sell it to.
And that would sell it more than even so originally my brother was interested in selling this wood because it was environmentally, you were not.
It was reclaimed.
You weren't cutting down forests to get it, right?
Right, but you're still doing a whole process.
People didn't care about that. They cared about the other story, the one, the human heart story. They didn't care about cutting down the forest. They couldn't wrap their heads around that what they cared about was this story that it was Grandma and Grandpa's
Totally,
farm.
totally. And
it was romantic.
The romanticized thing. Well, and that's very funny because a friend of mine who invented the concept of the clothing swap, and she did it as a green
I remember
thing.
having clothing swaps at your house.
Well, yeah. Well, remember we went to one like 12 years ago. I sent you the picture. It was so funny. So my friend invented the concept basically, and it was meant to be green, but that's not what inspired me.
No,
the
it was so much fun.
It was so much. So the concept, what sold people was the fun, the community,
the potluck,
the
the
girls
drinking,
having fun. And also
we would try this shit on.
We'd try it on.
We'd be like, oh my God, I can't believe it looks so good on you.
But remember the piece that really got us totally going was that wedding dress.
Oh,
It was the chick who brought her wedding dress.
Oh, I remember that. It was so crazy.
And she'd never worn it, or she'd gotten divorced, and she was doing this as a way of exercising those demons. And that
so it was almost like a therapeutic.
It was a therapeutic thing. And that was the story that you and I took away from that. And we told people about the clothing swaps. We're like, it's so therapeutic, it's so bonding. And this chick brought her wedding dress. And that was the story that then my friend was able to use time and time again of like, and you know, this chick with the wedding dress. And I thought that was like,
I remember that being like, that's,
right?
Yeah, that's crazy.
That was it. That was that seminal example.
It's crazy.
And that's where they say, bring a story, don't have it just be basic, bring it out of your comfort zone, right? So your grandma with her story of like bleeding out, you know, if she just said, I worked my ass off, I was ironing and I was feeding people,
who the fuck didn't do that?
Push it to the human.
She almost bled to death.
Push it to the Karena Humana.
Yeah.
She almost bled to death. Or this chick had this horrible marriage, and here's her wedding dress that she's either going to give away or
she can't even sell this shit because it's that bad.
Like, push yourself out of the comfort zone to bring that story. Okay, you had this universal story, but now what's the detail?
Well, and I was reading a little bit. I was doing a little research, and then I was like,
what research?
Yeah. No, I mean, I was thinking about. I'm like, what's one of the storytellers or one of the you know, I was kind of thinking back that really left an impression on me. And I have to say, I mean, as like, far as authors are concerned, it was Dorothy Allison and Bastard Out of Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
I was unbelievably just swept away with her writing. And to this day...
Because it's raw.
It's raw.
Yeah.
And she talks about... And I kind of felt like she was one of those first authors that talked about, like, poverty, sexual abuse,
very much so,
all these things that many people...
Right. This is very like Angela's Ashes, romanticized poverty. Yeah. This is not that.
No.
This is like
this was fucked up. It's uncomfortable to read.
Yes.
It resonates with you if you grew up in poverty, if you grew up with any kind of like weird sexual abuse or like drunkenness or drugs.
And I think that even if you didn't grow up with that exact thing, you can kind of identify, like, she takes it so far.
She takes it out of that comfort zone.
Out of the comfort zone to where you can then extend it to whatever you grew up with. Even if you had the guilt of not having known that kind of poverty.
Right.
Like, that's still going to touch you because she takes it beyond.
Yeah, she does. And from, you know, I read a lot. There was one book that she did. It was like 2 or 3 things that I know for sure. And it's funny because a lot of people, including Oprah, have kind of stolen that concept since. But it was Dorothy Allison was, you know, she would tell, it was kind of a compilation of short stories. And it was a little tiny book, and it had like a theme where she would talk about like a really fucked up situation. Yeah. And then she would say, but, you know, the thing I know for sure is the takeaway. Is that I'm a nice person and that I didn't deserve to be beat like that. Or whatever it was.
Right, no, but it's that takeaway that you get from that
and she was
edgy situation.
The fucking queen.
She was.
Like you were saying, condensing it into a sentence or condensing it into a concept. She did that, and she was one of the first writers where I really was like, whoa.
A lot of people have actually... you know, studied the whole concept of why some ideas stick and others don't. And it really has nothing to do with the, you know, base idea. It really has to do with the expression. It really has to do with how you capture people's imaginations and their hearts. So that's, you know, that's major. There's that book, The Heaths. They wrote the book Made to Stick, and it's all about going viral and how things, you know, work out that way. So then, though, there's the thing about your grandmother continuously honed her story. And so there's this concept of, if you're a storyteller, become a sculptor. start adding things to it.
Yeah,
start
she
taking
would.
things away. Like, see what resonates most with your audience. Like, how can you, you know, and this is not lying. This is forming your product. This is forming your story so that it becomes this tool that's just that much more.
Yeah, and she
focused.
would add, you know, as I got older, there were things that I remembered where she'd be like, oh, and, you know, Dolores, you know, the baby was Dolores. Oh, and, you know, and I couldn't even feed her.
Dolores, named for pain.
Yeah, because I couldn't even nurse her because I was unconscious.
And her breasts were chapped.
Oh, and she, you know, she was like, oh, and we didn't even have anesthesia. They just put a rag of chloroform over my face, and I just would, I would go to sleep. And, you know, and there was this whole, like, and I could smell the chloroform. And I
smell
could,
it. I feel the rag on your face.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many elements to the story. And I kind of feel like, you know, thanks to her, I'm completely, you know, traumatized, but I'm, you know, like,
I know.
No, but I mean, I think she was kind of my, even though I grew up in this impoverished, uneducated place, she was kind of my first experience with literature. I mean,
absolutely.
She was.
But also, look at what she did. She grew that story. Like, not only did she polish it and hone it for her audience, but she grew that story as you became more mature as a listener.
Yeah.
Look at how she started throwing in more details.
She did.
You know what I mean?
She did.
So she really became very empathetic with what you needed. Like, what did you need out of that story?
Yeah.
Because that story was one way when you were 5 years old. You needed one thing out of that story. But when you were 12 years old, or when you were, you know, you needed something else. You need to know, like, what's it like becoming a woman? What's, you know,
like what cross do you have to bear, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And like, what are you about to? And I kind of felt like it was almost like a warning. Like,
completely.
You know, I mean, she was also the same person that said, you know, told off some. I mean, she was a very Christian woman. She would go to church all the time. And I remember she said she yelled at a priest in a church and walked out because they were preaching against anti-birth control. And she was like, you know, she was like, I would get pregnant every time I would, you know, sneeze. And she was like, if they had birth control in my day, I would have been eating it by the handfuls.
Right.
And that's what she said to this guy. Like, you have no business telling me that I can't take birth control.
That's another element, okay, of storytelling is the tension and the drama.
Yeah.
So you can't tell a story that just all kind of goes along down this easy road. You have to you have to introduce the tension and the drama. You have to bring this thing that's going to shock your audience in some way to make them think about your problem in a different way. Like, if your grandmother was there telling people in, you know, Alabama or whatever about, you know, abortion rights and in Georgia, she would have brought in that tension and that drama. She would have told her story with the background that would resonate with those people, where they'd be like, oh my God, now I'm starting to kind of see it. I mean, a lot of them wouldn't.
Well, I mean, she was a woman that birthed 7 children.
Right.
You know, she never had access to birth control.
Right. So she's the authority, you know, which is another thing.
She knows exactly what it means to bring a baby into the world.
And that's another thing.
Feed it and clothe it.
Well, yeah, and that's another thing in your storytelling. What part of your story can only you tell? Like, what are you entitled to tell? You know, what's your production? Like, if you're an artist and you were huddled on the floor of your studio for a month and you were bleeding out and crying, like, that becomes part of a story that only you can tell.
Right.
You know, your grandmother's story, it's a story that only she could tell. Steve Jobs, who did all this, like, completely, you know, inventive stuff, like, the story of these things, like, he was uniquely entitled to tell these aspects of the story because he earned it.
Right.
And I think that resonates with people that much more. Like, if you were, you know, for Last Go, if you were one of the hunters and you were putting your bloody handprints on the wall of the cave, you're uniquely entitled to express what it was like to be doing that hunting, and that becomes that much stronger.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting. That can be brought down to whether you're an artist or a creative entrepreneur. Like, I think that all works out, you know, to
and I think it carries your whatever you're creating. It carries your brand, it carries your product, it carries your craft, your art, you know, all of these things. I mean, if you're making pickles, you know, and you have a story,
great pickle stories.
There's so many people that make pickles.
Yeah, but if you bring that story,
you know. Yeah. But I mean, what's the pickle that everybody knows? The Vlasic pickle. Like, I can't even say.
Can't say it.
No, but I mean, like,
I
think that, you know, there's so many products where you could say, oh, there's millions of people that make that same product, but what are the ones that stand out to you?
Let's look at something really simple. I mean, if you look at, hot dogs.
Yeah.
Okay. Kosher Franks. if it's whatever brand they are, but the kosher Franks, there's a story behind them.
Yeah.
The story implies a process. The process implies a quality. The whole thing has a reason for being, and it appeals to a
blessed
certain
by the
audience.
rabbi.
Yeah.
I mean, everything.
All of that stuff, and you're like, these are magically better because of their story.
No, it's true. I mean,
You know?
I will, and I will actually test myself where I'll go in and, I'm buying a product and I will look
and you'll be like, can I actually tell the difference?
And I will be like, well, it's 30 cents more.
But the story is so freaking awesome.
Yeah.
You'll do
and
it.
I will be like,
I know.
it's kosher. I can pay 30 cents more for kosher.
Right? And you're like, I'm not even Jewish,
I don't
but I'll
want something
freaking do
that's
it.
not blessed by
Right?
the rabbi.
Right?
When I could have something blessed by the rabbi. What the hell am I
What
paying?
the hell? Right?
Like, come
it's
on.
worth my 30 cents.
It's 30 cents worth
I get it. And it's so true. And that's something, but then
That's
here
the
comes,
power of the story.
It's the power of the story, but then here comes this other brand, Fork in the Road. And I'm like, oh fuck, that's so Robert Frost of them.
Yeah.
And I'm imagining this roadside stand with these gourmet hot dogs, Fork in the Road, the path less taken. And I'm like, oh, holy shit.
But think about the stupid Oscar Mayer song.
Oh, I know.
Like
you can't forget
that
it.
was like ubiquitous
Oh
with
my God, it so
with
was.
American barbecue.
My favorite was the bologna, the Oscar Mayer bologna.
Yeah,
Oscar Mayer knows the B-O-L-O-G-N-A.
Yeah,
see?
Totally.
That was, it was rehearsed so that you bologna,
didn't grow up
it was
in the 80s, 70s, 80s
without knowing that
that
freaking
fucking song.
Yeah, but like, bologna was like, that's a bunch of bologna. Like, the whole story behind bologna is like, it's a mystery meat.
Bologna it's like Karena Humana.
It's like Karena Humana. It might as well be.
It's like something made in the blender and put out on the...
But you focus that story. You make that little
they're
song.
like meat pancakes that if you knew what was in it, you would not eat it.
Right? But your bologna had a first name. It's O-S-C-A-R. Your bologna has a second name. It's M-A-Y-E-R.
Yeah.
And, it's... It's the story, yes, because Oscar Mayer knows the way to be able to
and that song tapped into
the kids were all like, I want the Oscar Mayer. Like, you teach them how to spell it, you teach them how to say it, you teach them the name, you give them whole detail. Yeah. And they want it. It
becomes part of
completely
your childhood.
Totally.
Your childhood story.
Exactly. And that's the final part of telling a story, is that when you're telling your story, like, you need to frickin' practice that story, because believe me, you think it's second nature, but it's not. Like, your grandmother, before she got to that point where her story was just second nature and all perfect, she rehearsed that shit on other kids before you.
Well, I mean, I think she told it probably to other women in her church and other aunts, and everybody was like, ooh, ooh. So she got a lot of feedback. She got a lot of feedback on that.
A/B testing.
Yeah, A/B testing.
Sure.
And then I think what happens with a story is it becomes kind of part of your identity, right?
Completely. Whether you're an artist or a person or a brand, that's what it does become. It becomes a part of your identity. So you better make it good. You
better make people want to hear it, because it's got to have some tension. It's got to have some struggle. It's got to have some sorrow. It's got to have a happy ending. It's got to have
drama.
Lots
and all of that balance.
Yeah.
And know your audience. Those are the major things about, the story.
I mean, it's funny because I had a really fucked up childhood, but I don't...
This is her story. She's been practicing it.
I don't...
Let her know.
The thing is I don't... I don't identify with it as much as I used to. I mean, I feel like over the years I've done a lot of work, and I don't identify with that part of myself as much anymore.
Right,
However,
but the personal experience and the background is very important to your story.
It is. It's part of my palette. It's part of my character. It's part of who I am. And I'll tell you though, I don't tell it as much anymore. I'll tell little parts of it,
because you don't need it as much. It's not part of your identity.
It's not as relevant anymore. But there are moments where it's still relevant sometimes, and I've gotten to the place where I'm detached enough from it, and I still own it because it's my story.
Well, it's part of your repertoire of stories,
and I know exactly when to weave it in.
Yeah,
and
I like that.
Sometimes it's useful.
Completely, and I love that. That's like when you have ad campaigns, like when you're a brand, and you can see the progression in your ad campaign, and each ad campaign is a story,
right?
And you're like, oh, remember when Oscar Mayer was doing the song, And then now Oscar Mayer, God knows.
And they had the car that drove around with the giant hot dog.
And the giant hot dog. Yeah, exactly.
Like, I mean, even Red Bull tried to pull an Oscar Mayer. Remember the Red Bull cars?
Red Bull, yeah, but remember they became synonymous with living this crazy on the edge life. They were having all these events where people would be jumping off.
Yeah, they would be like jumping off bridges and shit.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was part of their story. But if you look at a brand's progression of like what their story is quite interesting, because they'll phase out one of their stories, but it becomes still part of their history.
Right.
You know, I'm sure the people who like, you know, at Lasco, they probably were like, oh, fuck, that was an old story. Oh my God, how embarrassing. Story about the woolly mammoth, you know, like,
well,
now
I think,
it's all about, you know.
I do think that there's a part of, you know, when you're growing an entity, a business, a product line, an art form, whatever it is, a music brand, you know, a music type or genre, I do think that, you know, over time as you grow with that, and I think that you always want to kind of evolve as an artist.
Totally.
I you know, there's a point where you're like, do I leave it behind? Do I include it? You know, do I make a belt out of it and just wear it on the show?
No,
you know, like, what do you do with it?
I think that your stories, you want them to be good enough that you can have a little anthology that you carry around, you know, whether it's in a folder that's about your brand that you can show investors, you know, or whether it's something that you keep in your little scrapbook with, you know, and I think that it's really important. And I love that people are writing memoirs more and more. And I really wish, the problem is so I, you know, host a writing group, and I shit on memoirs a lot because so many people, just because it's a memoir, just because it's their story, they have a lot less standards for it. They think, oh, it's my story, so it's fine. No, fuckers. Find a theme, find the tension, find the drama, find the action, find the thing where you go beyond, realize who your audience is. Where do you start? Where do you finish? Like, you have to break things into a product because it's not going to be as powerful if you don't. But I do value the fact that people have this urge to tell their story.
Yeah,
and I love that, you know, and I want that to continue. I mean, I would hate to phase that out. That would suck. I mean, we see all the tech and everything, and if people stop wanting to tell their story, I'll be really sad. And I think that that's where brands are kind of taking that baton and they're running with it.
I think the problem, you know, the only problem that I have with this whole storytelling process or genre, or doing it to promote your brand or your product or your art form, is if it becomes contrived.
Yeah.
If you're trying to fit it into the same narrative that other, like, oh, well, people like homegrown, organic, or they like this or that. It's like,
let's make a story.
Make your own story.
Yes.
Do not glob onto somebody else's story and then try to push your stuff into it.
But I think that the consumer and the client, the person who
you think they know.
I think they have a feeling. Yeah, I think that if there's a lack of sincerity, I think that it's a little bit obvious. And I think that's when you start trying to be all things to all people. That's where it doesn't work out that well. That's where things get less sticky, because if you don't have a very specific audience, and that's where, you know, like our podcast, I think, appeals to a very specific audience of people who are, you know, these creatives or creative entrepreneurs at a specific juncture in their lives where, you know, and I hope that it resonates. And we've had some wonderful feedback where it does resonate. Does it resonate with, you know, gazillions of people? Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. But I think that it feels more authentic to me to be able to tell our real story to people who actually are there to listen to it. And that, you know, they're not going to be, you know, it's not people who are just swiping left or right on our situation. You know, it's more of a slow growth type situation. And I like that.
I like that. It's kind of like, it's like the Greyhound bus.
It's like the Greyhound bus,
that
except
we just talked about.
It's like our Karena Humana.
Yeah.
It's our pound of flesh that we're trying
to process.
Yeah, notice how usually we're like, ooh, we had a refill break, or ooh, we had a cheese
break.
We
didn't have a refill of
weird. My glass is more half empty than usual, but
flesh.
We would like to recommend, but we'd be lying, and that wouldn't be an authentic story.
It's not authentic.
So sorry. Yeah.
But it made a good episode, I'll tell you that.
It made a great episode. It was very topical. It allowed us to focus our story.
It really did.
On something. And if you are a wine brand that makes really good wine and has a great story, contact us, because we would love to feature you in a more flattering light.
Yes.
Better story. We'd be
better
so
story.
much more.
We would do a really good story.
We would do such a good story.
Yeah, we would.
Cheers to you guys.
Cheers.
And we will see you next time. Thank you. Cheers.